Hey everybody, it's Mr. Vasquez. It's been a while, I know. Things get pretty hectic trying to teach in a room with no one else around. I hope things are going as well as can be in this trying time. I'm going to read to you a supplemental story from the Christopher Columbus main lesson page. This isn't exactly what's on the page here, but it does talk about this guy named Christopher Columbus, whom we've all heard about. So just listen and enjoy, perhaps. I hope things are going well. Hold on just a sec. Again, it's from this book that I've been using as a resource since I started this. The news of the Portuguese discoveries, the news that ships had sailed to unknown shores, spread all over Europe. People's minds were stirred by these stories. In the old days, people had some hazy idea that there was, far away, something called Africa or something called India, but no one had given much thought to what these far away places looked like. Now it was different. There came tales of great riches, gold, precious stones, ivory, in these faraway lands, and everyone wanted to know more about these strange places. Yet, people still had very odd ideas about Africa and Asia. One can still see maps of that time that show Java inhabited by men and women with tails. Another map shows how cotton grows in India. It shows a tree which has a little sheep as fruit hanging from the branches. He plucked it off a tree, I guess. But these maps were very popular, and people all over Europe wanted maps to see what the world was like. Map making became a new profession, and all this interest in faraway lands and in maps had been sparked by Prince Henry the Navigator and by the discoveries made by his ships. Portugal's rivals, Venice and Genoa, were still engaged in the spice trade. Genoa was engaged in another profitable trade. There was very fine cloth made in Italy, and the ships of Genoa carried this fine Italian cloth through the Strait of Gibraltar and then to England. The English paid good money for the cloth, and so Genoese ships frequently sailed through the Strait of Gibraltar past the coast of Portugal on their way to England. It was not always a safe journey because French ships made a habit of attacking ships of Genoa and robbing them of their valuable cargo. There were regular sea battles between French and Genoese ships. The year 1476, about 50 years after the death of Joan of Arc, and 16 years after the death of Prince Henry, there was one such battle between French and Genoese ships only a few miles from the coast of Portugal. The ships from Genoa were unlucky and were sunk, and many of the sailors drowned. One young Genoese sailor, though badly injured, caught hold of a wooden plank in the water which kept him afloat. For hours he drifted helplessly, but luck was with him, and the waves flung him ashore on the coast of Portugal. The name of this young Genoese sailor was Christopher Columbus. The Portuguese, who found the shipwrecked sailor, were kind and helpful. They looked after him, and when Columbus had recovered, he made his way to Lisbon, the capital of Portugal. Lisbon was very different from his hometown, Genoa. Genoa's port was slowly dying. There was less and less trade every year, but Lisbon was a flourishing port, teeming with vessels bringing spices from the east, gold dust, ivory, and slaves from Africa. Sailors from many nations thronged the streets. Columbus decided he would not go back to his own land, to Italy. He would stay in this prosperous, lively port of Lisbon. He was good at drawing maps, and so he settled down as a map maker. He did well in his trade and married a Portuguese girl, the daughter of one of the captains who had discovered Madeira for Prince Henry. As a map maker, Columbus studied every map he could get a hold of, and one day he brought a map made by a fellow Italian, Toscanelli. Now, this Toscanelli had read the books of a famous Italian traveler, Marco Polo, remember him, who, 200 years earlier, traveled to Cathay, which is China, visiting the lands of Kublai Khan. Marco Polo had traveled east to reach China and India. But this Italian mapmaker, Toscanelli, 200 years later, had a new idea. If the earth was round, it should be possible to get to Asia, to China, to India by sailing west. If you went on and on west, you were bound to come to Asia in the end. Now, this is quite true. But this mapmaker, Toscanelli, made one great mistake. He had no idea of the real size of the earth, and he imagined the earth to be much smaller than it really is. And so, in this map, the coast of China was only 3,000 miles west of Portugal. The real distance is about 10,000 miles, but no one knew anything about the real distance at that time. And when Columbus pored over that map of his fellow Italian mapmaker, he had a great idea. The Portuguese ships were trying to sail eastwards around Africa to India for the spices. But this eastward journey was more than 10,000 miles long, as they had to sail around all of Africa. But if the ships were to sail west across the Atlantic Ocean, it would be a journey of only 3,000 miles. And he, Columbus, would be the first to open a new way to Cathay, a way that went west across the Atlantic. Of course, Columbus himself was not rich enough to buy a ship, to pay sailors, and to buy food for the journey. His dream could only come true if a king would give him ships and sailors to explore the great ocean in the west of Europe. But this ocean, we call the Atlantic, was in those days called the Sea of Darkness. For people believed that beyond the Canary Islands and Madeira, there was an endless dark fog in which no ship could find its way. When Columbus put this idea before the King of Portugal, he found that the days of the adventurous Prince Henry were over. The king had no wish to waste money or ships by sending them into the terrible Sea of Darkness. At this time, Columbus's Portuguese wife died. There was nothing to hold him to Portugal, and he decided to try his luck in the neighboring country of Spain. So Columbus and his young son left Portugal for Spain. But Columbus' hopes that the royal court of Spain would be interested in his idea were dashed. He came at the worst possible time. At the time, Spain was ruled by King Ferdinand, Queen Isabella, and it was the queen who made all important decisions. Queen Isabella was the real ruler, and she had set her heart on one great ambition. The southern half of Spain was still in possession of the Arabs and was still ruled by Muslims, and Queen Isabella, who was extremely religious, had set her heart on conquering the south of Spain and making it Christian. When Columbus came, this war against the Arabs was still going on. Queen Isabella told Columbus she would only consider his idea to sail westward to Cathay when Granada, the last Arab stronghold, had fallen. So Columbus had to wait, and the waiting was not made easy for him. The Spanish noblemen of the court despised him as a commoner. The monks and priests who were the advisors of Queen Isabella were against his newfangled ideas. They said to him, "If you sail your ships around the edge of the world, they will fall, and you'll never sail back again. You must be a fool even to think of it." It was a very trying time for Columbus, I bet. At long last, Granada was taken by the troops of Isabella. The last Muslim stronghold in Europe had fallen, and the whole of Spain was under Isabella's rule. But the war had cost a great deal of money, and Isabella could not afford to spend money for a wild adventure. The ship sailing into the Sea of Darkness might never come back, and the money would be wasted. And Columbus was told to go and try his luck elsewhere. Full of bitterness, Columbus decided to leave Spain and go to France, or perhaps England. He had only gone a short distance, and was stopping at an inn when a horseman came galloping to call him back. A Spanish nobleman, Luis de Sant Agel, Agel, had offered to lend the money for the expedition. He hoped that Spain, like Portugal, would grow rich from trade with spices, and that Columbus might find a shorter way to Cathay and India. It seemed to him worth taking a risk, as Prince Henry had done. It was this loan which made it possible that a few months later 3 ships sailed from Spain. the most famous three ships in the history of exploration. One ship, the Columbus's flagship in which he sailed, was called the Santa Maria. Two smaller vessels accompanied the Santa Maria, the Nina and the Pinta. The day on which they sailed was August 3rd, 1492. It was a Friday, and it was a day in which changed the history of the world. Really had a tremendous impact. Anyways, that's the reading for Christopher Columbus. There'll be a part 2 to this. Not sure when I'll be able to film it or get it out. Anyways, I hope things are well. Sun is shining. Hopefully you're getting fresh air. We're ironing the wrinkles out at the school as far as computers, technology, turning in work, doing work, and all that kind of stuff. So I hope you guys are doing okay. And again, if you're struggling at all, just let me know. We'll sort it out. We'll figure it out. And I'll see you guys later. Take care.